Hello and welcome to Turn Up the Volume. My name is Anyia and I came on board to be YSWN's Audio Equity Champion last year. YSWN, which is Yorkshire Sound Women Network. I'm very passionate about getting women, girls and minority gendered people into the audio industry and have been working as an EDI consultant and trainer for the past 5 years, specialising in anti-racism, unconscious bias and intersectionality. And I'm also the industry lead of YSWN and have been leading on the Volume Up initiative from which Turn Up the Volume was born. So, Yorkshire Sound Women Network, YSWN, was founded in 2015 by women working in the sound technology industry who wanted to use their skills and influence to address gender and racial inequality across the board. Our mission is to support a flourishing industry to welcome, encourage and progress the inclusion of women and people of minority genders at all levels, from studio floor to boardroom, and make sure that it reflects the diversity of its participating communities. Our work is organised into 3 major areas. Community, that's where we are working with adults from hobbyists to students to professionals to build confidence and share the skills for women and people of minority genders to continue pushing a career in sound and music technology. We do this through delivering YSWN events across Yorkshire and elsewhere, and also making sure that our workshops are participatory and hands-on, and also embedding career presentations and sharing advice. Another area is education. We aim to increase audio technology knowledge and the attraction of career paths in the industry among girls and young women working in schools and community settings. We're currently running 4 funded placements through Youth Music to provide pathways into the audio world with mentoring and training in post-production, sound engineering, and most recently, vinyl creation and mastering. Our final area is industry. We really want to influence the attitudes and behaviours of the industry to make it more inclusive. Providing training and sharing webinars like today in relation to gender diversity and raising awareness of unconscious bias and promoting flexible working practices is really important to us. Which is why we created our Volume Up Kite Mark scheme, which was developed to support organisations to demonstrate their commitment to create a more inclusive sector through a very crafted framework. This is for businesses to structure their approach to supporting women and people of minority genders in sound. I'll go into a bit more about this shortly. But first, I would like us to just watch this short video. But first, here is a short video about why we do what we do.
It's time to turn up the volume on gender equity in the audio and sound industry, and we want you to help us. Less than 5% of the music tech industry is made up of women, non-binary or trans people. Of this, under 1% are from the global majority, Asian or ethnically diverse, which means it is seriously lacking in fresh ideas, new sounds and innovative ways of creating. It just isn't diverse enough. We know everyone can thrive in the right environment, which is why we want you to get involved in our campaign to turn up the volume on gender equity and be heard.
So on the subject of being heard, it would be really wonderful if you could just take a minute to think about what it is that brought you here today. Why are you here? Why are you watching this? Why is this something that interests you? So I'm going to give us a minute, and in that minute, I would like you to just get a piece of paper, get a pen, or if you're on a computer, open a document, and I just want you to write down your why. Thank you so much for doing that. It's really important for us to find out what our why is so that when the journey starts to get a little bit more difficult, it's more time consuming than we would have liked, we have our why there to go back to. So if you have space, I would like it if you could just write this down somewhere, put it up on your wall in your office, or share it into a document in your files in your computer, and just have it there to be able to go back to remind yourself of why this is so important to you. And this is our why. So this is a report that was published in January 2024, and it was called the Misogyny in Music Report, published by the government. It said women working in the music industry face limitations in opportunity, a lack of support, gender discrimination and sexual harassment and assault, as well as the persistent issue of unequal pay in a sector dominated by self-employment and gendered power imbalances. Despite increases in representation, these issues are endemic and are intensified for women faced with intersectional barriers, particularly racial discrimination. As mentioned in the short video, when we look at the current state of the music industry and see that less than 5% of the music tech industry is comprised of women, non-binary or trans people, and then we look at the testimonials in various reports, it's easy to see why the gender balance is so skewed. A recurring theme that came up in our research was men discussing female musicians' technical abilities. Respondents to the Musicians' Union survey noted a lack of confidence from employers in female musicians' abilities. When we then look at the different points at which women and minority gendered people start moving away from the sound and audio industry, there are clear times in which they stop engaging with music tech. One is when choosing music tech at secondary school, then when they go into college. If they do make it into higher education, there is another drop-off when transitioning from education into industry. For those who do build careers in the industry, there's a clear drop-off when they become mothers or female carers, who are almost 3 times more likely to turn down work opportunities than men, 72.3% compared to 25.5%. A small but concerning group of people, 13.8%, of parents and carers report being denied work because of care responsibilities, nearly all of which were women. Another drop-off point is around menopausal age. For the first time, UK Music has used their survey to collect data relating to women or menstruating persons experiencing the menopause and the impact that this could be having on their careers. Almost half, so 47.5%, have had their work affected by its symptoms. Yet 3/4 of these individuals haven't taken the time off work they need to manage their symptoms for fear of repercussions. Taking an intersectional approach to the data, of that statistic that tells us that less than 5% of the music tech industry is comprised of women, non-binary or trans people, less than 1% of these are Black, Asian or ethnically diverse, which in reality is 0%. Being a disabled woman is also still a barrier to equity in music. A participant told our Wired researcher, "It takes me twice as long to do things," causing her to feel isolated and shut out. So our Wired research was gathered as part of a project speaking to those on placements as part of a higher education course. And unfortunately, what we found reflected the same narrative found in the Misogyny in Music report that was published earlier this year. We found there to be multiple accounts of harassment and misogyny and threats of sexual violence, which were made to female tutors. Aside from personal assault, we found female tutors were routinely undermined by their students and were paid less than their male counterparts. When female and minority gendered students did speak up about negative experiences, they were diminished or made light of. Students were called oversensitive, over-emotional or paranoid when misogyny and or sexism was called out. This continual disempowerment and the lack of role models in their workspaces meant women and minority gendered people studying saw the industry, even before leaving education, as one that wasn't set up to support or empower them. We also wanted to understand what the barriers to progress within the creative industry are from the perspective of women and minority gendered people wanting to enter the industry and how they were being blocked. Our Wired report collated last year highlighted some of these blocks and barriers. So as I mentioned, we have there the victim blaming, the diminishing of the experiences, the feelings of not being worthy of being there, microaggressions, and, their sexism and misogyny being diminished by joking off. And comedy is something that is so often used to undermine people's experiences. You know what I'm like. It's just a joke. But I think what really struck me about these responses is that none of it was surprising. All of these aggressions I've experienced in one way or another, but it's the emotional toll that I found to be even more damaging, because it takes away the belief that this industry is one that we have ownership of. The feelings of vulnerability, unworthiness, powerlessness, it keeps the power out of our hands. I think especially what is horrible about our findings is that feeling that you have to shrink away to avoid the risks being attached to being visible. That fear of judgment if you're not perfect, being shamed by others, looking stupid or naive, or being afraid of being seen as the one representative of an entire group and letting down the side. So how likely are you to remain in a space that is consistently making you feel like you're not meant to be there? Iwan, founder of II Studios, one of our trainee partners, really outlined their experience in a way that drove this home.
One thing I always say is it's all well and good having quotas and encouraging people to hire more diverse workers, but if the space itself isn't safe or the person isn't equipped to deal with the microaggressions and all of the things that happen when you walk into a white majority space, then you're kind of setting people up for failure. I was always the only female on all of my courses. I was very often the only Black person. So, I'm a Black woman in a space that's mostly white male. And the energy that you get from people ranges from, what are you doing here? To them trying to give you something else to do because they can't fathom that you're actually a sound engineer. So it's almost like, oh, here, the makeup department's over there. And it's like, no, I'm actually here to do sound and record sound. And depending on your temperament, that can be really demoralizing and it can make you just walk away. And I've known people who've just walked away from it and said, I can't be bothered. It's so stressful.
I think what really strikes me about what Iwan is saying is how it reflects what young people are still telling us today. That being marginalised in these spaces is stressful. And it makes people take the easier option, which is generally to leave the stressful situation altogether. So, despite 50 years of gender equality efforts in music, women are still underrepresented and underprivileged in many parts of the field, and many gender stereotyped roles and hierarchies still prevail. It's that toll of exclusion that drove Yorkshire Sound Women Network to set up Volume Up as a tangible way to hold people to account when they say they care about gender equality. It's making sure that people sign up to getting conversations past the point of just talking and turning those conversations into action. However, we also know that for most people, they want to make positive changes, they're just unsure how, which is where this audio equity standard came from, as a way to challenge and support the audio and sound industry in becoming gender equitable. YSWN's Volume Up standard enables sound and technology businesses of all sizes to demonstrate their commitment towards a fairer, more inclusive industry. There is so much scope for work in the audio industry and so many talented women and minority gendered people from different backgrounds who could thrive in it if given the opportunity. But we know that sometimes it can be hard to know where to start. The idea behind Volume Up is for it to be adapted to any organisation that takes it on, to shape it in the best way it would suit you. There may be areas in which great steps are already being made and others where some more thought and more ideas would be really helpful. We want people to see growth, so each strand of this framework will have a commitment next to it, an action that can be achieved in 6 months. The standard is made up of 8 different strands for making tangible change. These are understanding and awareness, workspace culture, working practices, pay, progression and professional development, recruitment, marketing and communications, and advocacy and support. We want people to see growth. So each strand of this framework has a commitment next to it, an action, a pledge that can be achieved in 6 months. Then, after the 6 months, we review that commitment with the organisation. And if everything's been achieved, which I'm sure it will, the standard will be provided to display online to show that time and energy has been spent by this organisation to make their space more diverse and gender equitable. We see this as the beginning of a journey and one that will continue. This is a 6-month roadmap and it is based on SMART goals. But we have also broken it down into these 3 main phases. We start with phase 1, to create a foundation of understanding and awareness in regards to gender diversity before moving on to look at workspace culture and working practices. you'll see that against each of these strands, there's a pledge example. These are by no means things that you have to do. We'd love it if you came up with your own pledges, but these are some of the best practices that we've found when we've been doing our research. This pledge is a theme that runs throughout all the strands to ensure words get turned into achievable actions. So, under understanding and awareness, your pledge may be to undertake YSWN or other gender diversity training. With workspace culture, you might implement a dignity at work policy or create something of a similar code of conduct for employees and contractors. For people in larger organizations, this may seem obvious, but we find that in these spaces where a lot of this work can be self-employed and freelance and nighttime industry based, sometimes these codes of conduct aren't in place, especially if we're working with smaller production companies or recording studios. And just having a piece of paper there which outlines these procedures does so much in terms of making people feel safe. Under working practices, it may be that you write and implement policies on flexible working and late night working, thinking about that experience for lone workers, and also to create a policy with a focus on sexual harassment. It's about thinking, how can we make sure that we are aware of the different experience our female and minority gendered colleagues might be having, and how can we make sure that they feel supported and protected within the space that we're providing. Once that foundational work has been done, we move on to phase 2, which is where we look at how people are treated within their workspace once they're there. One thing that came up many times in our research, aside from the clear gender pay gap, was the lack of opportunity to continue growing within chosen fields. So we look at the progression of people working in the organisation as well as the professional development of new people coming in, which goes hand in hand with recruitment. This phase looks at how to retain people alongside bringing them in. So it may that if you're comfortable with your pay pledge example, that you write a gender equality pay policy. If you're feeling brave, you could publish those statistics. And even if you don't feel like that's something that you're ready to do, even putting down all of those numbers and looking at them in relation to your workforce will definitely provide some food for thought. Under progression and professional development, a pledge example may be to get in an intern or paid apprentice or trainee to start bringing that talent in at a younger or early career stage to help support them on their journey. Or it may be to look at what opportunities could be offered to people who are already working within your space. One thing that we have also found is that women and minority gendered people are less likely to put themselves forward for promotions or opportunities because of that feeling like they have to tick every single box. When we look at recruitment, it may be that you also might be able to publish those workforce diversity statistics. Even gathering those workforce diversity statistics will definitely be able to show you where some work could be done. And also when you're looking at recruitment, it's really important to challenge your own unconscious bias. Maybe have a look over the way that you're recruiting, the language that's being used in the adverts, where those jobs are being advertised, because if you're consistently getting the same people applying, it's probably worth thinking about what could be done differently to start engaging with a new type of person. And finally, phase 3 is when we start shouting about the work that's being done to tackle gender inequality within the organisation. And often when people want to start making change, they go to this stage first. Although, of course, it's really important to make sure that the visuals that go out about an organisation is reflective of the team that that organisation wants to see. But it's really important that this is layered on top of a foundation of knowledge and understanding for it to be truly authentic. So when we do get to marketing and communications, absolutely make sure that those visuals reflect the diversity that you want to see in your organisation. Again, with recruitment, have a think about the language and the tone of your publicity materials. Is it gender neutral? And then when we start looking at advocacy and support, maybe there's an organisation that you can volunteer your time and expertise to. People who are already doing that work, maybe you can amplify all the wonderful work that they're doing through your social media. And maybe you can reach out to them and offer your resources and ask what you could do to help them continue to do the wonderful work that they're doing. So now it's time for you to do a little bit of work, and we're going to get you started on your own pledges. So please scan this QR code, and it's going to take you to a Google form which has the first two pledge sections: understanding and awareness and workspace culture. I want you to have a think about what your pledges could be and fill them out. So it's really important that you make your pledges SMART, that is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. This is because each of these pledges has to be completed within 6 months, and we want to make sure they're really specific. So make sure that it's something that you can really think, okay, who's going to do that? How would it be done? What teams need to be involved? What marketing would we need, etc. This will make it much easier to focus on what you need to do and demonstrate the progress afterwards. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. And I hope that that was interesting. I hope that it made you think in a slightly different way. And like with your why, it would be amazing if you could save this somewhere that is going to be available to you. Maybe you can write them down and stick them on your wall. Maybe you could share this with your team, but maybe just think about how you would start to get the ball rolling on this. Because we really do see this as the beginning of a journey, and one that will continue. But if you feel like your organization would benefit from having some training to get everyone started on the same page, please get in touch so we can discuss booking on to one of our gender diversity and inclusion trainings. This is a 3-hour session facilitated by an experienced YSWN associate, either online or in person, and we'll be looking at where the industry is currently, the difference between equality and equity, recognizing our unconscious bias, understanding how intersectionality impacts those from marginalized backgrounds, and considering retainment alongside recruitment. We'll be highlighting examples of gender discrimination within the audio industry and going a bit more in depth about the practical approaches that could be done to create a more inclusive workspace. If this is something that you feel like you're ready to do and those initial pledges made you feel really fired up, then please do get in touch with me. Once the volume up standard has been completed after your 6 months, we get back in touch after 18 months to see how you're getting on and see whether you want to help create some new goals to renew that standard, which lasts for 2 years. Essentially, we are here to help you as your cheerleaders and your critical friend. And also, if you'd like to keep reading up on this subject, there are multiple reports out there looking at gender diversity through a variety of different lenses, which would be a really great starting point. It's also really key to highlight that great work is being done in this field, and we are seeing such positive change. When Women in Control began reporting on the level of representation in the music industry at boardroom level in 2020, there was only 32% of women and minority gendered people there at boardroom level. When they reported again in 2024, this has gone up to 52%, which is an increase of 20% in 4 years, which shows that by continuing to have these conversations and pushing for change, we can get it. So thank you so much for being here today. If you've got any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear them. So please keep in touch on all of the different platforms and keep an eye out for a Turn Up the Volume podcast, which is going live very, very soon. And we'll be able to give you some more insights into each of these different strands and what you can do to make your organization a bit more gender diverse. So let's turn up the volume together.